Alright, so I took the stud out of the header. This one, I took the header off. Easier just to pound the thing out. All you gotta do there is take out the 202 sensors and then put them back in. But here I'm taking off the axle, or disconnecting it from the transaxle, and what I've got is I've got the car in neutral so that I can rotate those bad boys to an advantageous position. They're a T50 anyhow, so I do that, and then this drive shaft will just sort of fall out of the way. Alright, the drive shafts are off and hanging, and now I'm gonna brace up the motor side of this thing, because the only thing holding the transmission and motor up at this point are the transmission mounts on the back, the two of them, and the motor mount front and center. So I'll show you when the motor's supported, and then it's about taking the transmission off. Okay, this is the flange off the transaxle that the drive shafts sit in. There's 3 pairs of bolts that go around that, and there's the drive shaft for the other side, the axle for the other side, and I've got the motor supported. I actually put a little pressure on that, trying to keep this small jack out of the way for when I have to get to the transmission bolts, because the edge of the motor is literally behind this cross brace, and there's a whole series of bolts. In fact, you might be able to see that bolt B right there, that's labeled B because of the 101 Boxster Projects book. And here's the transmission mounts. So this bolt comes out, this bolt comes out, there's another one over here, so there's 3, and then these 3, or rather there's 2. There's one on top of each of the hydraulic bags, so those come out, and then this whole mechanism will come out. But obviously before I do that, I'll put something underneath the transmission to support it. Okay, bolt D in the 101 Projects is at the top of the transmission there, and I don't know if you can see, but basically I've got a handful of extensions and a swivel socket, and then I believe that that's a 15 millimeter I got on there. And you can see bolt C with a light on it right there, and bolt D's at the top with the socket on it. Anyhow, you can get to all of them from underneath, and there's B right there, and the other ones, E, F, and G, are on the passenger side of the transmission. But I wanted to get D, which I've got them all marked from having done this twice before, but I wanted to get D off before I start farting around with anything else, and I haven't done the transmission mounts, haven't got them loose at all. So I'm gonna get all of those, well, maybe not all, but I'm gonna get the hard ones loose or out, and leave the easy ones for when I want to put the transmission jack underneath and take the transmission mounts at the same time. Okay, so this is the passenger side, and the project book is E, F, and G. That one that's out is E. F, I'm keeping in for now, is right there behind that hose, and G is south of that. I've loosened them, but they're still in, and then everything's loose except for A, which is a funky Torx headed thing behind that cross brace on the bottom left, and I got to remember it's a short reach. I got to remember what I did to get that guy out. It's some kind of short Torx that you put a wrench on, but I got to figure that out, and then I'll relay that in a minute. So that little hex head looking, Torx looking hole is what I call the A bolt, and I got to it with a 8 millimeter Allen socket, which is here. Let me put that in, and then I'll show you what the deal is. Give me a second. I'm gonna need 2 hands and I'll fire it back up. All right, so I don't know if the camera's catching it. That is an 8mm, and then I put a 10mm open end wrench on that bad boy and turn it. Takes forever. Sorry about the shaking. My hand's kind of tightened up. Okay, transmission's off. Those are the 2 shift cables right there and there, which disconnect from 2 balls on the transmission. There's 1 electrical sensor on the passenger side that you need to disconnect. And in terms of absolutely the most important thing on this job is when you start putting it back together, there's a stud on the transmission that you need to make sure goes through that hole that I'm pointing at there, which takes a nut on the back side. That's a 15mm nut. That's the one you get lined up first, because if you don't get that guy lined up, you're never going to get the input shaft of the transmission to mate up through the clutch, etc. So that guy, the one to the right of it right there, is G hole based on that book. And so I guess that one right there is the H hole, but it's a stud on the transmission. So the last ones I pulled out were B and F after I got all the transmission mounts and stuff like that taken off. So I'm gonna spend some time. Transmission's off. I got a transmission jack, but I'm only gonna use that guy for putting the transmission back up because it articulates in both directions. You know, you can tilt the tranny right or left or whatever. Oh, one other thing that I do, and I did this after my first, you can see here, that's the fluid line for the clutch slave cylinder. I leave that on the car because putting it back in, putting the clutch slave in and keeping the hydraulic pressure in the whole line is just next to impossible. I mean, it's almost impossible doing it without the transmission in the air. So I feel the pain. I've kind of blocked off my clutch slave line. I know it's dripping and it will drip, but I'll just bleed the damn thing at the end. Anyhow, I'll post this and we'll see what's next. One other sort of hint or tip is my wobble bits. A lot of times I put tape around them like this. It's just painter's tape. That's so they don't flop around like a marionette with its Achilles tendon cut. Comment if you know what reference that, what movie that's a reference from.